Films are made up of sequences. Sequences are made up of scenes. And scenes are made up of shots. In previous episodes, we covered lighting, composition, and the history of animation.
Can you paint with all the colors of the wind?
In this episode, we'll dive deeper into the mechanics of how animation works. This is episode 15 of The Shot List. Principles of animation. Before we get started, remember to subscribe to StudioBinder and click the bell to stay up to date on all our filmmaking videos. Let's begin.
Metal.
The 12 principles of animation are the basic fundamentals of traditional animation. Coined by legendary animators Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, the rules have become crucial guidelines for anyone entering the animation profession. The principles have their roots in Disney. Thomas and Johnston were two of the 9 old men, the nickname for the early core group of animators at the company. The 9 old men developed Disney's distinct style of animation, which prioritized movement that was rooted in the laws of physics, along with the desired emotion of a character and sequence. As Disney grew in popularity and power, its influences over traditional animation spread. In 1981, Johnston and Thomas published the book The Illusion of Life, which included a list of 12 principles they said all animators at Disney abided by. Writing. As each of these processes acquired a name, it was analyzed and perfected and talked about. And when new artists joined the staff, they were taught these practices as if they were the rules of the trade. Today, the principles are the rules of the trade, taught far beyond Disney, and continuing to be relevant even as 3D computer animation has dominated the field.
Okay then, Mr. Lightbeer, prove it!
All right, then I will.
The first and arguably most important principle is squash and stretch. Squash and stretch gives an object weight and lifelike malleability. Thomas and Johnston explain. Anything composed of living flesh, no matter how bony, will show considerable movement within its shape in progressing through an action. By squashing and stretching an object throughout a movement, an animator can signal the object's mass and rigidity. The more an object stretches and squashes, the more gelatinous it is. This technique came from intense research.
The first thing I did when I got a little money to experiment, I put all my artists back in school. Now we were dealing in motion, movement, and the flow of movement, the flow of things, action, reaction, all of that.
This research all went into Disney's first feature, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. In this scene, the dwarves' faces squash and stretch, exaggerating their facial expressions and making them seem harmless.
Why, you're little men!
The technique must follow one crucial guideline, maintaining a constant volume. When an object stretches on one axis, it must squash on the other. If volume shifts too much, believability will start to fade. Motion is also made more lifelike with the use of anticipation. Anticipation is the preparation before movement, or in other words, the wind-up. According to Thomas and Johnston, this makes the action more legible to the audience. They must be prepared for the next movement and expect it before it actually occurs. This is achieved by preceding each major action with a specific move that anticipates for the audience what is about to happen.
Whoops.
Take this sequence from Beauty and the Beast. We know what Gaston is going to do before he does it. And the huge wind-up indicates it's going to be a hard punch. To sell it, LeFou is stretched when he's hit out of frame. Anticipation can be subtle, like in this movement in Mulan. Yao's teeth don't go straight into the pole. First, he pulls his mouth back, selling the primary movement. Anticipation makes an action clearer and also makes it more realistic. In real life, we have a backswing before we hit a golf ball. Additional clarity in a given frame comes from staging. Staging comprises a variety of elements that go into the composition of a frame. According to Thomas and Johnston, all these elements should prioritize presenting the core idea of the frame clearly.
Leave me!
They elaborate. An action is staged so that it is understood. A personality so that it is recognizable. An expression so that it can be seen. A mood so that it will affect the audience. This means using many of the same principles of staging in live-action film. Mise en scène, performance, and framing, with wide shots for big actions and close-ups for facial expressions. All these elements can be used to effectively deliver the idea of a sequence. Animators can use eye trace for maximum clarity. In this scene from Pinocchio, each step of Lampwick's transformation into a donkey is shown in the center of the frame. The audience's eye doesn't need to search for where to look. In The Incredibles, the animators wanted to emphasize the mundanity of Bob's job. The first shot clearly establishes that his work is indifferent to the suffering of everyday people, beginning with a close-up of a big red denied and panning up to a sad old woman.
Denied? You're denying my claim?
Then we see Bob. His physicality clearly indicates he is bored and unfulfilled. The set decoration emphasizes the monotony of the office job. And the color palette is desaturated, indicating that joy has left Bob's life. In 2 shots, the animators have delivered the core idea of the scene.
And if you can't help me, I don't know what I'll do.
To ensure clarity in an action, Thomas and Johnston recommend working in silhouette. Animators at Pixar used this idea when programming the movement of characters in Toy Story. Pete Docter explains.
You can actually make it work and read and communicate without any facial expressions, without the use of your face, then you've done a really successful job. So actually what we tried to do is get everything to read just in the acting, the pantomime, and then when you stick the face on, it'll only plus that.
Buzz-looking alien! Where?
There is no set formula to achieve ideal staging, but if a viewer is able to quickly understand the purpose of a shot, you know the staging is working. The next principle of animation is straight-ahead action and pose-to-pose. This principle refers to 2 different approaches to traditional animation. Straight-ahead action is when an animator simply animates one frame after another, letting her drawings take her wherever they lead. Pose-to-pose, meanwhile, is when an animator draws the key poses within a movement and then draws the in-between frames after. Straight-ahead action is best for unpredictable movement, like a quick and frantic reaction, or elements like fire and water. As Thomas and Johnston note, the animator should be as surprised as anyone at the way it comes out. Pose to pose is best for movements and scenes which require more control. For example, if you need your character to hit multiple different important beats.
Mowgli, look, buddy, there's something I gotta tell you.
Tell me what, Baloo?
Gee whiz.
Pose to pose and straight ahead action both have their uses, depending on the movement you are trying to create. Movement is core to the next principle: follow through and overlapping action. Follow through and overlapping action are crucial to realistic movement in animation, drawing on the law of physics to make a character's actions believable. Follow through refers to appendages on a character which continue to move even after the rest of the character has stopped. In other words, follow through is a representation of inertia. Something which is moving will continue to do so without resistance. This too was based on meticulous real-world research by Disney artists.
Take a look at his legs and feet. Notice the follow-through on the pant legs? How they come down late every time, after the feet come down.
You can see the concept at work in this shot from Aladdin. The feather continues to move in one direction after the genie's head starts moving in another. A related concept is drag, which refers to the other side of inertia. Appendages start to move only after the character has begun moving. This too makes a character feel more lifelike. Or, as seen in Looney Tunes, it can be used for comedic effect. Overlapping action, meanwhile, is the concept that different parts of a body move at different rates. Take this movement in Peter Pan. Peter's arms, legs, and head are all moving in different ways. And when he jumps, his torso moves first, his arms move next, and his legs follow. Within this principle, Johnston and Thomas also discuss the moving hold, which refers to the movement that occurs when a character isn't in action. Living things are never totally still. They breathe, blink, and make adjustments, and even these small movements can inform a character. As animator Gendy Tartakovsky notes,
we did that on Fang in Primal, where we had her breathe more because she's such a big creature. Sometimes you forget about the little things, and sometimes the little things say a lot.
Follow-through and overlapping action ensures that your character's movement doesn't feel unnatural. The next principle is also rooted in physics. Slow in and slow out. Slow in and slow out refers to how a character begins and ends their action. When a character starts moving, that movement will be slower than when the action is fully underway. The same goes for when a character stops their action. Nothing can stop on a dime. There needs to be some slowing, even if it's for a brief moment. For traditional animators, this means more in-between frames closer to the start and end of an action, and fewer frames in the middle of the action. For computer animators, this means giving the motion curve of an action an S-curve, or easing. According to Thomas and Johnston, this kind of realistic motion was a top priority for Disney. They quote him as saying, "Our work must have the foundation of fact in order to have sincerity." Realistic movement is also rooted in arcs. Thomas and Johnston note that very few living organisms are capable of moves that have a mechanical in and out or up and down precision. Instead, animators at Disney realized that most natural action moves in arcs. This can be true of a bouncing ball or a turning head. Take this shot from The Great Mouse Detective.
Good evening, madam. Is this the residence of Basil of Baker Street?
All of Dawson's movements, no matter how small, are arcs, giving life to a simple dialogue shot. For computer animators, creating an arc in movement means adding curves to the x-axis, y-axis, or both, depending on the action. Once you have your main action defined with arcs, it's time to focus on secondary action. Secondary action can bolster the core idea of a sequence. This is a movement that occurs in support of another primary movement. In Perfect Blue, director Satoshi Kon uses differences in secondary action to inform character. In this chase scene, Mina's primary action is running, and her secondary action is pumping her arms. Her doppelganger, meanwhile, hardly moves her upper body at all, signaling that for her, this movement is effortless. The disparity in movement heightens the terror of the scene. Thomas and Johnson emphasize that the secondary action should never distract from the primary action.
There, I knew it was my slipper. Oh, it's exactly my size. I always wear the same size. As soon as I saw it, I said, oh.
When Anastasia is caught lying about her foot size in Cinderella, the animators augment her anxiety by having her fidget with her hair.
Well, it may be a trifle snug today. You know how it is, dancing all night.
Her hands never get in front of her face, allowing the primary focus to stay on her expressions. This type of hyper-realistic movement came from the use of rotoscoping on the film.
They'd shoot live action and they'd blow it up to animation-sized paper, and then they'd put a sheet of animation paper on it and draw right over it.
Another consideration for an action is its timing. In animation, timing is dependent on the amount of drawings included in a movement. The more in-between frames in an action, the longer it will take. In this shot from Nightmare Before Christmas, there are dozens of frames in Jack's movement, slowing down the action to convey his tentative curiosity. This head movement, however, has fewer frames. He is quickly shaking his head after falling. For Thomas and Johnston, timing is a crucial aspect of characterization. A character doing an action slowly has a completely different meaning than if they do the same action much faster. Timing should also take into account the number of frames a drawing takes up. A new drawing every frame is referred to as drawing on ones and is best for detailed movement. Drawing on twos, meanwhile, is more common and better for faster action. Drawing on threes is frequently found in anime and is better for more generalized action or background movement. In Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse, animating on ones, twos, and threes is used for characterization. Spider-Punk was animated with various frame rates in the ultimate expression of non-conformity.
I don't follow orders, neither does he.
I'm invited to HQ? Woo!
Here's Alan Hawkins, head of character animation.
Character animators reinforced his unpredictable DIY imagery by using offset frame rates within the character silhouette. Often Hobie's body would be on 2s and 3s, his jacket on 4s, and his guitar on 6s to create the feeling of a chaotic animated collage.
What's this dude saying?
It's English for we get along great and we're close friends.
Is this the younger from 1610?
Do you understand this guy?
Timing is a crucial part of a character's performance and is more complex than just fast versus slow. Including a variety of speeds in one character can add nuance to their movement and performance. Performance is also affected by the next principle: exaggeration. Of course, the beauty of animation doesn't lie in its ability to perfectly recreate reality. This is where exaggeration comes in. Thomas and Johnston quote a Disney artist. I don't think Walt meant realism. I think he meant something that was more convincing, that made a bigger contact with people. According to Thomas and Johnston, exaggeration can serve the emotional reality of a sequence. Take this scene from The Lion King.
In short, our pal is doomed.
Pumbaa and Timon are sad that they've lost their friend to a new lover. To make this read in the wide shot that ends the sequence, the animators exaggerate their sadness, with their mouths wide open and tears flying into the air. It's not realistic, but it feels true to the ending of a mournful song. Exaggeration doesn't have to be so over the top. The animators for Bambi exaggerated the deer's long legs and clumsy walk to heighten his youth and innocence, but rooted the character in real anatomy. Exaggeration is as fundamental to animation as any of the principles tied to physical reality. Its use comes down to the core idea of a shot. If it's not coming across, it may be time to exaggerate. Another animation fundamental is solid drawing. Solid drawing refers to the artistic fundamentals of animation. Essentially, an animator must remember that their character doesn't exist in a two-dimensional plane. Thomas and Johnston claimed that this was a crucial pillar at Disney. Signs were hung on many walls, and the one we remember best was this: "Does your drawing have weight, depth, and balance?" A casual reminder of the basics of solid, three-dimensional drawing. Your action can be as realistic as you want, but if the character looks flat, the scene will read as false. To avoid this, animators would occasionally use 3D replicas of characters, called maquettes. Disney supervising animator Aaron Blaze explains.
These are the maquettes that we get. They're basically just a three-dimensional reference for when you get weird angles that might be a little difficult to draw out of your head. It's there so you can go, oh, okay, that's how you do it.
Thomas and Johnston warn of twinning, having a perfectly symmetrical character, or a character's arms and legs moving the exact same way. This too would go against the principles of solid drawing. Today, solid drawing is often automated with computers, generating 3D characters for an artist. Still, many animators maintain that the basics of solid drawing are fundamental knowledge for anyone starting out in the industry.
There's so much to learn.
Thomas and Johnston's last principle of animation is one of the most important and most difficult to define: appeal. Appeal is animation's equivalent of charisma. A character must have qualities that draw a viewer to them. Thomas and Johnston explain. The word is often misinterpreted to suggest cuddly bunnies and soft kittens. To us, it meant anything that a person likes to see: a quality of charm, pleasing design, simplicity, communication, and magnetism.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
There's no one way to achieve this, but one of the most consistent methods in animation is to mimic the characteristics of a baby's face, with large eyes and round features.
What's a baby?
This type of design can be seen in Dumbo. Even though the other elephants are repulsed by his ears, the audience can't help but love him. Thomas and Johnston also recommend simplicity. Strip a character's design down to the bare necessities. Mickey Mouse, for example, can be recognized simply by his two circular ears. As character designer Torsten Schrank notes, appeal needs to have purpose.
It's not only about finding nice shapes that are appealing, but it's more about to nail down the personality, what's inside that shape as well.
Anton Ego's design, for example, uses exaggeration to make him an instantly appealing villain.
It's come back. It's popular.
His angular face and towering body are exaggerated beyond the realm of reality. But it is these exaggerations that quickly characterize him as the ruthless and intimidating antagonist of the story.
You're Anton Ego.
You're slow for someone in the fast lane.
And you're thin for someone who likes food.
There is no one way to make a character appealing. What matters is that the appeal is there. As Thomas and Johnston put it, spectators enjoy watching something that is appealing to them, whether an expression, a character, a movement, or a whole story situation.
We're on our way, Ellie.
Animation can take countless forms, but if you look closely, you'll see that most of the medium's best works adhere to the principles Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston laid out. Start planning the next great animated movie with StudioBinder's storyboard software. And remember to subscribe and click the bell to stay up to date on all of StudioBinder's new videos. Now, start drawing.